A ceasefire to end the 14-month conflict between Israel and Hamas could soon be agreed. White House spokesman John Kirby says there are grounds for cautious optimism after US, Egyptian and Qatari negotiators made an intensive push to advance ceasefire talks. But fighting in the Gaza Strip is continuing, and Israeli ultra-nationalists are making plans to settle there. DW's Tanya Kramer reports.
This is what Deir al-Balach in central Gaza looks like after more than a year of relentless war. Said Suleiman came here from Gaza City. The former bodybuilding champion has been displaced 9 times.
Our biggest dream is to return to Gaza City. We dream every day about our homes and neighborhoods, our neighbors and friends, but we have begun to feel that a return is impossible.
The United Nations says over 90% of people in Gaza have been made homeless and forcibly displaced since the war began. In 14 months of war, the Israeli military has divided the Gaza Strip into several parts. A buffer zone appears to run along its eastern border, and the territory is effectively divided into north and south by the newly created Netzarim corridor. Military checkpoints make it practically impossible for Palestinians to return home to the north. And the destruction is immense. This satellite picture shows central Gaza in September 2023. This is the same place with the Netzarim corridor running from east to west in November 2024. A world away in Israel, Anita Tucker dreams of going back to Gaza. She's an Israeli who lived in the Netzer Hazani settlement in central Gaza for 30 years. Settlements are illegal under international law. In 2005, Israel unilaterally dismantled its 21 settlements in Gaza.
We were asked to leave or forced to leave in 2005. We said, you're going to see these rockets coming into Israel all over. It's going to go to Tel Aviv. And it's not logical, because there's never going to be peace if we don't learn to live next door to each other. And it's near the sea, and they're aggressive. That's their target. That's their culture. When we're weak, we had October 7th, the extremists take over, and there are many people there who would love to leave. If we want to have peace, we have to be in charge and know this is so close to Israel, this has to be part of Israel.
Ultra-nationalists like Tucker hope that if the military stays in Gaza, Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territory will follow. Although establishing settlements in Gaza is not an official Israeli government policy, many on the right openly discuss it. This member of Knesset from Netanyahu's Likud party says the Israeli military will likely stay inside Gaza for years to come.
There needs to be a very hard and painful payment in land from the area that made this ferocious attacks against our civilians. Therefore, we need to take land, we need to occupy it, and after we do so, and apply Israeli sovereignty, settlements and villages and towns will be there.
Change the course of history.
But this opposition party leader says such plans are dangerous for Israel.
Hard, even for me. And the only reason why we don't have an agreement with Hamas and finishing the war is because the extreme right in Israel, the extreme right is willing to continue this war for eternity and to take the opportunity of this war, in fact, to re-establish settlements inside the Gaza Strip. This is totally unacceptable, and we are going to fight it.
In Ramallah, the Palestinian State Minister of Foreign Affairs says international pressure is needed to try to stop any plans for annexation in Gaza or the occupied West Bank.
We have been under occupation for so long, and it's only time for exercising our right for self-determination and materializing our state on the ground. After what has happened in the last year in Gaza, with all the casualties, the killing, the destruction, everything that Palestinians have been undergoing, the immense suffering, compounding the previous suffering, only deserves deserves that the world looks at our plight in a more respectful manner and looks at us as human beings.
With more and more people being displaced by Israel's continuing military invasion of northern Gaza, many are fearful about what's to come.
Our fathers and grandfathers were told in 1948 they would return soon, but they did not. We fear this will happen to us again.
For many here, life is about surviving from day to day. Any thoughts of the future are on hold.
Well, that report from DW correspondent Tanya Kramer, who joins us now from Jerusalem. Welcome, Tanya. Let's start with this White House talk of a potential hostage deal and ceasefire. What are people there saying?
Well, I think there are a lot of mixed feelings about it. You know, hopes are up, but then in the past there has been a lot of disappointment, and I think this goes as well for the Palestinians in Gaza, who really want to see a ceasefire. They're under constant bombardment. They also want to see, obviously, what the near future will bring, as the Israeli government has not really laid out a plan for the day after, and that leaves the door open for so many scenarios, as we've seen in this report. But in Israel also the pressure is mounting on the government to close a deal, especially from the families and relatives and friends of those hostages that remain in Gaza. Obviously, they have been saying for over a year, they've been demonstrating, calling on the government to bring these hostages home, and they have the back of most of the Israelis here. Majority, according to polls, want to see the Israeli hostages a priority to bring them home back to Israel. But there's also some opposition, especially on the political far right. They don't want to see so many yet unspecified number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli prisons to be released. But overall, people in Israel are saying there cannot be a total victory, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying. And he has also been accused by many to stall these talks. He denies that, of course. But without this cannot be a victory in Gaza over Hamas.
And talks have gone pretty much nowhere for most of this year. Why are hopes higher now?
Well, I think, as you also mentioned, you know, we hear a lot this mantra, there's cautious optimism from a lot of officials. Basically, negotiations have restarted with Egypt facilitating these talks, Qatar as well, and both US administrations. We heard from the National Security Advisor last week of the Biden administration that he's cautiously optimistic, but also we understand that the special envoy of the incoming Trump administration is currently in Israel, also on a private visit, as it said, but he's also taking part in those talks. And the reading in Israel is that Hamas might be more flexible because of the developments here in the region. Hamas, they have put out a statement saying the talks were serious and positive, but they also warned that Israel should stop putting new conditions. So everything still, you know, is still up in the air. We don't know all the details, and we're expecting more talks today in Doha, and we just have to wait and see what will come out of them.
OK, thank you, Tanya. Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. Let's explore this with DW Middle East analyst Shani Razanis. So, welcome back, Shani. So we just saw Palestinians there worrying they might never return home, and we saw ultra-nationalist Israelis planning to occupy parts of Gaza. Is anybody clear about what Gaza is likely to look like if and when the fighting ends?
Well, it very much depends on who you talk to. I mean, if you look at the extreme right in the Israeli government, in the Israeli coalition, in Netanyahu's far-right, most extreme coalition Israel's ever seen, they're very clear. They don't even hide their intentions. They feel like the only way for a retribution, in a way, against what has happened on October 7th would be conquering Gaza again and having Israeli settlements, Jewish settlements there. But if you try to talk about other forces, international forces, and more moderate forces, it's clear that this plan is not very much feasible. And if you look about, you know, the Americans as well, they're talking about, you know, how we help Gaza rebuild itself and reconstruct itself. And we've been hearing yesterday reports that the Saudis are very much interested in partaking. And part of the deal would be for the Saudis to be able to take over Gaza and or the reconstruction effort would be under a bigger ceasefire deal that would include also a pathway to Palestinian statehood that Israel would have to commit to.
And we've seen some momentous shifts in the last few weeks, particularly in Lebanon and Syria. How have they impacted moves towards a ceasefire?
Well, the way Israelis see that is that they feel that Hamas is now isolated. Most of its backers and its allies in the region, if it's Hezbollah and Nasrallah in Lebanon, if, of course, Assad in Syria, who is gone, and the Iranian, proxies, and Iranians themselves have been weakened very much. They don't seem to have much ability or appetite to start any real escalation or fight with Israel, and so Hamas is basically isolated. And this is what Israel is counting on, because if you look at the talks we are seeing now about the ceasefire, fundamentally, the details have not changed much since it was first introduced actually in January and then again by Biden in May and in July. So what changed are the circumstances. This is a big part of this change. The Middle East has changed, and this shift in dynamics, the Israelis hope leave Hamas more isolated and give it more incentive to try and make concessions.
OK. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been criticised for a long time, people saying that he has no actual interest in reaching a deal. How fair is that criticism?
Well, I think the fact on the ground, the Americans stick to the fact that Hamas was the one who's, making it impossible. But there is inside Israel a lot of feeling that Netanyahu was stalling, partially because he wanted to avoid the need to make it to testify in his trial that he is these days, today as well, will be on the stand talking about the allegations against him when it comes to bribery and fraud. And the feeling was that he's trying to push that day, and he's using the war as a pretext for that. And this is out of the way, as well as a lot of achievements. And Netanyahu is very much proud to show of what he has done in weakening Israel's enemies around the region. So he also knows there isn't very much for him to still hold on to in saying, OK, once we do, we reach out, once we have weakened Hezbollah, this is already gone. Once we see Iranian stepping back, we already see that happen. So there's very little, excuses in a way for Netanyahu left that he needs to deliver. And this is partially, maybe the assumption is that this time it might be actually happening.
OK, and in a month's time, a new administration in the United States. Where does President-elect Trump figure in all this?
I think that's very smart, Phil. That's basically the biggest change that we've seen happening when it comes to, the force that has the biggest potential of changing the dynamics in these talks and on ceasefire. Because what we see as the Trump effect is such that it seems to be incentivizing both sides, Israel and Hamas, to try and make, some progress and break through to the other side. Hamas, it seems to be quite wary of what happens when Trump makes it into the White House. Trump himself has already, gave several threats of how all hell will break loose. I'm not sure there's anywhere worse for Gaza to get, but I'm not sure they want to try that. And Netanyahu as well, he knows he needs to please Trump. Their relationship is very rocky, very icy. He cannot keep on, pushing that away. At the same time, we've also seen Trump people already engaged. There were rumors yesterday that Netanyahu may have gone to Cairo. He then later denied it. But we do know that Trump's envoy to the hostages issue has been traveling in the region and was yesterday in Cairo. So Trump and Biden, both administrations, a very rare moment of consensus, seem to be pushing forward on this. And this is partially why we're seeing the optimism in the last days.
Fascinating analysis as ever. DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Razanis, thank you.
You're welcome, Phil.